everyone, and welcome to Canvas+Paint. This is a painting tutorial offered by Garden City Arts. If you, by chance, purchased the kit for this month's painting, then you need to lay out your pre-mixed paint in the order that you see here, 1 through 7, on your foam plate. Make sure you get out your paper towel, your piece of chalk, and make sure you have some brushes handy. These are not included in your kit. You will need a wash brush, a shader brush, and a round brush. And if you have all of these items laid out, then you are ready to get started on this fun spring painting. All right, to get started, we are going to work on the background. With most paintings, you want to work from back to front, and we're following that kind of guideline for this painting. You're going to take color number 1, which is a bright aqua green. You're going to grab your biggest brush that you have available or handy, and you're going to prime your brush. You dip it in your paint water and pat it dry on your paper towel. The reason we do this is to get the bristles nice and damp, but we don't want it dripping wet. I'm going to then grab some of my bright aqua green, and we're going to use this paint in its thickest form without any water, kind of in the center to really brighten up the center of the painting to give our daisies a good place to live. And then we can start mixing water in kind of as we come out and away from the center. Now, this background can look however you want. I am painting with diagonal lines, and I am starting with kind of some watered down paints. So basically putting a little bit of water into my paint, especially along the edges. I want it to be a little bit darker there, and when you put water in paint, you make it more transparent, okay? So basically you're making the paint more see-through, and it's allowing the background, the ultramarine blue that we painted these canvases to begin with, to show through. So I'm just going to keep adding. Now that I have kind of a nice base of kind of watered down paint, I can go back in with some heavier paint, like I was talking about, right where I want to put my daisies, and really brighten that up. Heavier paint basically means that you have less water in it, so it's more opaque paint. It's going to cover more of the background. Okay, so I'm just gonna keep working on this. I'm gonna speed up the video a little bit, but you can see my technique. I'm mixing water into my paint, laying down a nice layer of color to begin with. You can let as much of the background or as little of it show as you want. This is your preference. Once I have kind of a layer of very thin transparent paint, then I lay on some thicker, heavier paint. I'm going to use my brush at its thinnest point when I'm doing that. When I'm laying on the thinner paint, I turn my brush to its thickest point. So I'm going to speed up the video and get this background done. All right, now that the background's done, we can move on to the midground, foreground. So we're going to draw out our flowers and our jar next. Now, if you have the kit, you can pull out your cheat sheet. It is the tracing paper with the image already drawn on it. You are going to flip it over to the back side so that this tall flower is no longer on the left-hand side, but on the right-hand side. You use your chalk to outline all of your Sharpie lines, flip it back over so that the flower is on the left-hand side, and with a back end of a paintbrush, you apply pressure, and wherever you push down, the chalk will transfer onto your canvas. If you do not have that cheat sheet, no worries, you can draw it out. I recommend using a piece of chalk because you can erase it and paint will cover it up and it will completely disappear. So take some time and draw out your flowers. Once you're done, you're ready for the next step. All right, now that we have our background done and our image all drawn out, we're going to move on to color number 2, which is a dark gray. Now that we have our blossoms drawn, we need to start focusing on how we're going to paint these. We're going to work from dark to light, so we're going to start with this dark gray and establish where the blossoms or the petals actually attach to the center of the flower. By adding this dark gray, it helps create a more realistic flower. So what we're going to do is first outline kind of the bottom portion of the center of the flower. You want to stop where the petals stop. Okay, then with your round brush, we're going to outline kind of in between the petals. Okay, so really focus on the center and the kind of parts in between the flowers and the edges, or petals, I'm sorry, and the edges along the tops of the petals where they attach to the bloom. Okay. You'll notice that it kind of makes like a triangle, okay? There's like this empty triangular space that is left behind and in between of each petal. So I'm going to focus on that area. I'm also just going to focus a little bit on that empty space in between these petals. And I'm going to quickly do that to each of my petals. I'm also going to bring it down just a smidge in between. So I'm drawing these nice kind of frayed lines inside each petal and where it attaches to the center, okay? So you're going to do something very similar to this to each of your flowers. I'm gonna speed up the video and get all that done. All right, we have the dark portion of our flowers established. Now we're going to move on to a lighter gray, okay? And we're gonna take this light gray and we're going to just start to create some form with our flower. Even though our flowers are white, they're not going to stay all white. We need to make some areas of medium value along the edges in order to create some form and volume to our petals. So I'm going to take color number 3 and I'm going to focus on this top blossom again just to demonstrate really fast. First off, I would like to start addressing the center of the flower. I'm going to use this medium gray to start to fill in the center of the flower. And when I do that, I want you to think about form, okay? When you paint straight lines, it really flattens things out. If you paint curved lines, then it's going to create more form. Okay, so that was the very first thing I did, just paint in the center, get that started. Next, I'm going to focus on the edges of my blossom. So I'm going to leave some of my dark showing because the goal isn't to cover everything up, otherwise why would we do it? And I'm going to focus kind of on the edges. The center I can leave alone. I'm going to come back in with more white. I'm going to bring some lines into my black. And I want all of my lines to kind of point and curve to where, to create like the end or tip of a petal. Okay, there we go. That's all I need to do. So I'm going to do the same thing to this petal. I'm leaving a little bit of a dark gray line in between my petals to separate them. And I'm bringing this lighter gray up and creating a little bit of a point at the end and making sure that my petal has a nice loop where it's farthest away from the center. Okay, I'm gonna just keep doing this. You can watch me paint or you can start painting on your own, and I'm gonna speed up the video. All right, we have our blossoms well underway, and now we can move on to the centers. We're going to use 4 and 5, colors 4 and 5, an orange and a yellow to establish the centers of our flowers. I'm going to continue using a round brush, although if you are not enjoying that round brush, you could switch over to a shader brush. The reason I'm using this round brush quite a bit is because we're really creating a lot of lines and forms and curvy lines, and oftentimes the round brush is the best brush for the job. So I'm going to start off with my orange, and I'm going to focus this orange kind of at the bottom of the center of my flower. And once again, I'm thinking about form. So along this bottom edge, I am painting it in solid orange, but as I come away and towards the center, pretend like there's a point here, all lines should kind of point back to that point. And that will help you create some nice form inside your flower center. Okay, so creating a little bit of orange. Now, without even washing off my brush, I'm going to transition right to my yellow. And I'm going to start filling that in. Now, you'll notice that a little bit of the underpainting shows through, and it's not perfect and smooth. There's a little bit of dark color showing through. Personally, I like this. I don't think that flat areas of paint look overly great. So I think that we're just using the background to help create some texture inside our flower blossom, okay? If that bothers you, what I want you to do is do all 3 first, come back after you've done all 3. By the time you come back, this one should be dry, and then you can do it again, okay? And do a second layer of paint and cover up anything that you are really bothered by, okay? So keep that in mind. Paint covers paint. I'm going to speed up this painting and keep going. I'm going to do the other 2. I'm going to do them just like I mentioned or showed you on the first one. Right, we are done with the centers. Now we can move on to the petals, or back to the petals themselves. I'm going to take my round brush. I'm going to make sure I get all of my water out of it. And I'm going to take just straight white paint, okay? I'm going to focus thick, heavy amounts of paint kind of on the inside of my petals. I can come back in with my light gray whenever I need to kind of create some darker gray or darker areas where the petals attach, and maybe even on the outer edges. So I'm going to start with really heavy white paint right in the center. I'm not covering up all of the gray, some of it, but not all of it. I'm letting as much stay put as I feel is necessary. I'm going to make sure that the center of my flower is really nice and bright by putting 2 layers of paint on. So that first layer just kind of helped get the petal started, kind of filled in, and then the second layer is really where I'm adding brighter color or brighter white to the petal. Now I'm going to do that one more time here. I'm going to mix just a tad bit of water into my paint, not a lot, because I want this paint to be very opaque. And remember, water makes your paint a bit more transparent or see-through. Then I come back in with my second layer, put the brightest white wherever I feel like it needs it the most. And there we go. Now I can come back in with a clean damp brush, especially along certain edges, and soften and blend. A clean damp brush will help kind of soften any lines or hard edges that you might have. I like to use this clean damp brush to blend or make paint lighter so that the underpaint shows through a little bit more. Okay, so it is very useful if you're trying to blend or if you're trying to not let the paint be quite so heavy and thick and let maybe some of the underpainting show through. Okay. Here in just a moment, I'm going to move on. I'll speed up the video. Once again, remember, use really thick, heavy paint inside your blossoms. And then as you come out to the edge, let some of that gray show through. If you lose that gray, you can put it back in, okay? I grabbed a little bit of light gray on my brush, and I can just blend that light gray back in. Please excuse my dog. He likes to make sounds right as I'm recording videos. Okay, so I'm just gonna keep painting, keep perfecting these petals, and move on to my next petal as soon as I'm finished with this. I'm gonna fill up all of my petals. Go ahead and start painting, or you can watch me for a little bit longer if you need to maybe come up with a game plan. Okay, finally, we're going to add some of color number 7 to our composition. We're going to create these stems, and all of the stems need to go back into the jar. So I start by first deciding where I'm gonna put my stem, how it's going to attach to the flower. So for instance, this little guy, I'm gonna have him starting in between these petals and then coming down and into the jar. Now, don't worry too much if we haven't painted the jar yet. The reason for doing the stems first is so that we can paint the jar on top and we don't have to paint around the jar. So when you're doing this, if you would like to create some dark and light in your stem, you can take color number 2, which is that medium gray, or dark gray, sorry, and you can paint that along one of the edges of your stems. So you're basically putting some dark gray and then that light green goes on top of it to create some depth. We're making our stems look three-dimensional by having light and dark. Dark on the edges, light in the middle. Okay, so there's stem number 1. Now I'm going to do stem number 2 and 3 and then be done. So go ahead and start making your stems. I'm going to speed up the video. Okay, our flowers are done. All we have left is to do the jar. We're going to start with color number 2, the dark gray, and we're just going to outline all of our chalk lines, except for the reflection lines inside the jar. So inside those jars, the like curved lines, leave those alone. We're focusing only on the outer ring of the jar. Now, when we do this jar, we have to be mindful that we just got done doing our stems. The lines that are curved like bowls, that are curved down, concave lines, are the ones that are going to go in front of the stem. The convex, the ones that are domed like a hill, are going to go behind the stems. So I'm going to quickly paint the line behind the stem. If you cover it up, no problem. You can, if you cover up one of the stems, no problem. You can go back in and paint that over again. Don't worry about it. Paint covers paint. Okay, I'm going to outline all of my edges. The only one that you have to really worry about is that back of the jar to go around the stems. Everything else just covers the stems. Becomes a lot easier. And I'm just going to quickly paint all of my lines dark gray. Okay, all of the lines are now that dark gray. Now we can go over them and kind of highlight them a little bit. We're going to use the light gray, and we might even use a little bit of white if we need to. So the highlight is not going to be the parts that are behind the flowers, behind the stems. That stays dark. But the lines that go in front of the flowers can definitely be highlighted, especially on top of this jar. So I'm going to use fairly watered down paint, but be careful not to have too much water. I have too much water right here. My brush had a whole bunch of water in it that I didn't realize it had, and now it's very soggy. If you're painting flat on a table, that's not a problem, but if you're painting on a raised easel, you're gonna have drips. So be careful. I'm going to just quickly paint these in. These are just highlights on my jar. And then once I'm done with my highlights, again, we're not covering up all of the dark, because remember, why would we paint it if the point was to just cover it up afterwards? So I'm painting kind of next to a lot of my dark lines, and then I'm going to put in my highlights or my reflections of the jar itself to give it kind of a little bit of form. So there's going to be some highlights inside the jar. If you need to, go back with some of your dark colors to kind of blend or fix any mistakes that you may have made. For instance, adding too much water to your paint or to your brush, or having too much water on your brush. Don't be like your teacher. And when you're happy with those highlights, you are done. This is the very last step. Remember, you can take a little bit of white if you want and highlight maybe the parts of the jar that you want to be most noticeable. Maybe the parts that are closest to the viewer, so in the middle of the jar, okay? Or maybe off to the side. It's up to you. Okay, you are finished. Really nice job. Remember, you can erase your chalk lines after your paint is dry. So for instance, on these flowers, I can now get away with coming in with a clean damp brush or a clean paper towel and wiping off that chalk. I hope you had fun, and I hope to see you again next month. Bye.